All right. Good evening. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. We're so excited and so glad to be here with you this evening. I know we're going to have an awesome time together.
Yes. Welcome to Mental Health Matters, Coping Through Crisis. I'm Charlotte Perry, and this is Apostle Perry, and we're very happy to be with you on this evening.
And you know, Charlotte, we're here to have a very candid conversation surrounding mental health. And so we have some professionals that are here with us who's going to do several things. One thing that they're going to do, perhaps we get an opportunity and have some time remaining, they'll be able to answer some of your questions.
Yes.
And so if you have questions, you can just place those questions in the comment box and they'll be able to answer some of those questions. Right. They're going to help us bring awareness to the subject matter of mental illness. We hear a lot about it, as well as
we're hearing more about it than we've ever had.
Well, we're hearing more about it because, as you mentioned, you know, mental illness, coping through crisis. We are most definitely in a crisis, starting from COVID-19 all the way to where we are right now. Right. And so also they're going to address some of the stigmas surrounding mental health, and then also inform and enlighten so many of us and so many who are viewing in this area of mental illness.
Yes.
And so we want to go ahead and introduce our panel tonight.
Yes, we have an amazing panel
Amazing panel, and they're going to really bring you the information that is needed tonight. First, we have neurologist Dr. Eddie Patton. Dr. Eddie Patton. He's joining us tonight, and so we're excited to have him. Hey, good evening to you, Dr. Patton.
Good evening. Glad to be here, Pastor.
All right,
Perry.
we are so excited.
Lady Perry, good to see you
tonight, sir. And we know that you're going to give us the information that we need. So thank you for joining us tonight. And then also we have internal medicine physician, Dr. Chism. She's with us. And so we're excited to have her. Good evening, Dr. Chism.
Yes.
Good evening.
We are so excited to have you joining us tonight, and we're looking forward to the impartation and information that you're going to be sharing with us. And also, Charlotte, we have 2 licensed professional counselors that are with us tonight. One is Carlette
Matoir.
Yeah, Carlette Matoir. She's here with us. Hello, Charlotte. I mean,
Carlette.
Carlette. This is Charlotte.
Yes,
so hello,
sir.
Carlette. We're
Hi,
so excited to have
Pastor.
you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Also, we have Heather Lambert.
Yes.
She's joining us tonight, and we're excited to have her with us also. And so thank you so much for joining us tonight. Heather Lambert, thank you. And they'll bring her in a moment.
There she
is. There she is.
That was not Heather.
No, that was not Heather. That was.
He's like,
yeah, he's shaking his head. He's letting you know, no, that was not Heather. And so hello, Heather. We're glad to have you joining us tonight. And psychiatrist, Dr. Napoleon Higgins.
Welcome, sir.
That's Dr. Higgins. So thank you so much for joining us. Will you just help us welcome our panel? We're glad to have them tonight. And I know they're just chomping at the bits, as it were, to share with you information tonight surrounding mental health and mental illness. So let's get them to just tell us briefly a little bit about themselves. And so we'll start with you, Dr. Patton. If you can just give us a brief description of yourself, sir, we'll appreciate that.
To be here and a part of this.
Dr. Patton. Yes, right there.
Okay.
All right. So thank you.
Dr. Patton?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear
me? Can you hear me?
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you for introducing me, and I'm so glad to be here and be a part of this panel. I'm a board certified in neurology and psychiatry in my neurology training in Houston, Texas, and stayed on board. And very happy mental illness, and this is something that I my practice.
Okay, there we go.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patton. Again, we're so excited to have you. And now we're going to get Dr. Chism. We're going to have Dr. Chism just to give us some information about herself. So, Dr. Chism, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, and I'm board certified in internal medicine and been in practice for a number of years. And I see mental health and mental illness in a different capacity because as an internist in primary care, people will come to me, with whatever their initial complaints are, or sometimes even they'll come with their current conditions not being well controlled as a result of whatever their mental health or mental illness issues not also being addressed. So it does tend to overlap with the medical health aspect as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Our next guest is Carlette Matoir. She's a licensed professional counselor. Let's hear from Carlette.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. Like Lady Perry said, I am a licensed professional counselor. I am also a certified professional in compassion. I've been a counselor for 11 years, contrary to my baby face. I've worked in counseling for quite some time. And in addition to working with individuals in my private practice, I'm also a certified school counselor. So whether you are 6 or 65, I have opportunities to support all individuals in their community.
All right. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next guest is Mrs. Heather Lambert. She's a licensed professional counselor.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much, Apostle and Lady Perry, for inviting me to the panel. I am a licensed professional counselor. My area of specialty includes trauma-focused care, and we provide services on campus for 5 different school districts in the greater Houston area, and really interested in joining this conversation to talk about how mental wellness really impacts our ability to learn and engage in learning.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have psychiatrist Dr. Napoleon Higgins. He's with us this evening. So, Dr. Higgins, if you would just give us some information about yourself, sir.
Yes, my name is Dr. Napoleon Higgins, and I'm happy to be here and happy for the invitation to be a part of this and to talk about mental health. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist from the Houston area. Pretty much born and raised here. Never left. Lived below I-10 my entire life, and I'm down here in the Southeast Houston area in Clear Lake.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, look, let's get these wheels to rolling. And so our first question is, can you? I guess I'll ask you, Dr. Patton. Can you define for us mental health? We hear that term and that phrase used. Define that for us. Give some definition to mental health for us.
Absolutely. When I think of mental health, the key word in there is health. It's just like our general health, but unlike physical conditions like a broken arm that you can see, or a heart condition, or diabetes, mental health has to do with how we're doing mentally. How are we dealing with our surroundings, our emotions, a lot of those intangible things, those things that people can't readily see or identify unless they know you closely. So it's that makes it a little harder as a health professional to diagnose and really address, because it deals with such sensitive topics. A lot of times you have to go well below the surface to really get into these deep mental health issues. So that's probably the best way I would describe mental health.
Okay. And Dr. Higgins, I want to ask you a question. With the crisis that's going on right now, with this pandemic that we are experiencing, people having to make these major adjustments in their life and in their daily routine of doing things, from having to stay home. Some people perhaps losing jobs, having incomes adjusted. Things like that, everything that's going on. So how does that affect mental health in your profession?
Yes, the question of how does the current environment affect mental health, and it impacts it. Honestly, I would say the majority of persons that I'm seeing right now are facing some issue of anxiety or depression, and that comes from the chronic stress of what is going on. This has now been going on for a couple of months. And then, of course, things are continually, the issue with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and the young lady who was shot in her own home, sleep in bed. Things are compounding, especially for the African American community, but even beyond the African American community, it's hitting America right now. So I would say 2020 has been a difficult year. I jokingly say that we're not even halfway, and if this is like a basketball game, the good part doesn't happen until the last 2 minutes. Oh, wow. So I'm not quite sure, where we are right now. So we're under a level of stress that is not known to any person that I know. My father is above 80, and I say, Dad, has it ever been like this? And he's like, it's never been like this. And I was in school in the 60s. And wow. I was in part of those protests and those things, but to see everything happening so quickly. So we have to be careful of knowing that if you feel stressed right now, that is quite normal for the current situation. And honestly, I would say it's abnormal if you're not feeling something at all. So we've got to make sure we take care of ourselves. So at that point, get to the regular health things that help your heart, help your mind. So essentially, plenty of sleep, exercise, diet, nutrition. During times of stress, we actually need to work even harder to take care of our regular health. So the combination of things, and recognize that you are not alone. You're not by yourself. This is not a normal set of circumstances that are happening in the world. So if you're feeling stressed about it, don't feel like you're alone, understanding that we're all there and we're all having to adapt and adjust.
Wow, that's powerful. Especially when you said the things that affect our heart also affect our minds, and the things that we have to do to work hard just to take care of ourselves mentally. Colette, I want to ask you a question as a licensed professional counselor. So are you seeing more people that you're having to give guidance and counsel to, especially as a result, as Dr. Higgins so well put it, of the current environment that we're in?
Definitely, Apostle. In fact, I was speaking with a client yesterday, and she's in a very unique situation because she's single and has not had any previous signs or symptoms as it relates to mental health challenge. And yet, we were having a discussion about being triggered. And, the compounding issue for her is that she's home alone, whereas, you have opportunities to dialogue with colleagues or have greater access to your family. Well, it's just her with her thoughts. And so, it's very encouraging, when we let people know, hey, if you're experiencing these types of thoughts and, you're by yourself and these are things that have not occurred for you before, yes, it is time to seek out someone, to seek out, help and assistance. And so it's just been very interesting how many people have said to me, I feel like I'm being triggered. And triggered in a way that I haven't before. Our first question as mental health professionals is, when's the last time you felt something similar to this? And quite honestly, a majority of those who I've been in contact with, especially clients, are saying this is the first time. Mm-hmm. And so I offer up, this idea of winning, failing, and, passing COVID-19 or stay at home, like all of those are false. Because we're just trying to all figure out how to navigate in a space that is unprecedented.
Wow. Okay, great. And what about you?
Let's put them all on so we can just allow.
Yeah, if we can get everyone. Yeah. So Heather. So in your profession as a licensed counselor, also, and when you're counseling people, how do you look for certain signs to know if you're dealing with some mental illness with a client of yours?
Are there any common signs?
Absolutely. Especially what we're looking for right now is drastic changes or shifts in behavior. We also use the GAF score, or the Global Assessment of Functioning. How well are we able to function in life? Has the current level of stress impacted our ability to focus and to work or to take care of our children or to engage with our loved ones? As that generalized assessment of functioning decreases, that's when we start to look for symptomology emerging of different mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, acute stress, and even we're looking forward and thinking about the development of post-traumatic stress disorder. Recent studies out of China say that as high as 96% of Chinese who are a little bit ahead of us on this pandemic are demonstrating the symptomology of post-traumatic stress disorder. So as clinicians and mental health professionals, that's something we're already on the lookout for and educating our clients, because this is long-term. This is a long-term stressor. And another thing that I'll add is very frequently when we go through great times of difficulty, we can lean on our community, we can lean on our friends. But right now, the reality is we're all in a similar situation. We're all being impacted. So when we look for the person who's standing strong, who's not impacted to come and support us, they're also dealing with their own unique stressors, because this is a large-scale pandemic on top of normal life, on top of the racial trauma that many of our communities have endured. It's just a lot. And so as a mental health community, we're looking mostly for changes and a decrease in functioning.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that is good.
That's good. So I have a question. What do you do if you notice signs in a loved one or in a friend? Dr. Chism?
Now, that can be very tricky, particularly in an African-American community. And I also want to interject one thing, because sometimes we know when people are stressed and they come in and they feel they have anxiety or that kind of thing. But there were a few years ago, medication commercial for depression said, "I hurt." So some people will come in and have other manifestations, stomach ache, headache, those type of other somatic complaints that are also related to the stress that they're feeling. But generally, if somebody comes in, if the relative or somebody, one of the caregivers is seeing signs, that they get help. Bring them in, get counseling, get help. Don't just try to handle things on your own, particularly with depression. If it becomes very severe, and so the people need to not feel isolated. They need to not feel like they're alone. But the biggest thing is to get help. And sometimes that means, being firm, making the appointment, bringing them in. Don't just say, okay, you need to get help and then leave it up to the individual. But if they're really showing some signs of distress, then, you may have to lead them, make appointments, etc., or even go with them. Say, I'll drive you. Hey, can you, I'll take off from work, whatever that is, so that they're not isolated.
Do we freeze?
Okay.
Start with, where to turn. And so sometimes they just need that helpful hand of somebody to come along and walk alongside them.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Apostle, I'd like to just say one thing about that, recognizing the signs. Because I definitely stress in my patients, one of the key things that you can really point out, particularly in loved ones, is look for changes in patterns. If you have someone and they're used to every week participating in the card game, or they like looking a certain way, dress a certain way, and all of a sudden you notice they haven't bathed in a couple of days, or they're just more withdrawn. Little signs like that can really should open your eyes to, hey, say there's something else going on when there's a change in a particular pattern concerning sleep, hygiene, all the little things that we take for granted. But there could be an underlying a source of mental illness going on.
Yeah, and that's great. And I also want to, just kind of add to that. I want to ask Dr. Higgins. So, Dr. Higgins, what are some other signs, in conjunction with the ones that Dr. Patton just mentioned, that family members or friends can kind of look for in a loved one when it comes to mental illness?
Yes, that's a very important, question. And as Heather had stated, the difficulty right now is many of us are so disconnected, you don't really know who's hurting right now. So you're looking in that change in behavior, that inability to move forward, realizing that good mental health means that you are able to adapt to the situation and actually put yourself forward in a way to be able to handle it. And during this time of crisis, we've lost some of those connections to find out how people are actually doing. But the other part is that, are you adapting to the situation? Obviously, we're having a lot of stress and we cannot get out and speak to people like we would normally do. But are persons becoming more withdrawn? Have you not heard from them in several days? Are they losing weight or gaining weight? Or normally before there's some sort of emotional breakdown, people will reach out. So, so it's important for us to call people, to check on them, to see how they're doing, actually give an encouraging word, and trying to get an assessment of if somebody's not doing well or they don't seem to be their normal selves, then they're not able to adapt to the current situation. At that point, you need to start to notice is whether or not they're being affected by their mental health issues. Realizing, like I said, all of us are having that impact right now, but how bad is it? Are they not going out? Are they not going to work? Are they not, taking care of their kids? Are they losing their function? As we talked about the GAF, Global Assessment of Functioning, has the person lost functioning to where they're not able to take care of themselves and the people that they're responsible for and adapt to the situation? A lack of adaptation is going to be a serious problem. I spoke to a friend the other day and they said they had lost 15 pounds. And I was like, since the crisis has started, I'm like, are you eating this? The answer was not much. Well, at that point, we're looking at this person may actually be in the throes of not just stress, but now we're looking actually at mental illness. And that at this point, they're not taking care of themselves to even adapt to the current situation that they're in.
That's good. Now, I want to pose this question to both the professional counselors here, and that is, there's some family members who may see some of these signs of mental illness, but perhaps don't want to say anything because either they themselves may feel embarrassed or may feel like they don't want to, bring any kind of shame or embarrassment to the loved one. And so,
or just not aware of what that
just
is.
not aware. And so, do you have to deal with that? And if so, how do you address that to encourage a loved one to bring that family member forward and get the help that they need?
Right. So, Apostle, what I would offer, especially to our community, our colloquial language is so rich and diverse, and it's funny. I love to use it as well, but we need to be careful to use our words and to call a thing a thing. So this idea of, oh, well, she's touched, right? Well, if you're noticing something, with a family member or friend or someone that you're connected to, just glossing over it with, a common term in our community doesn't serve that person. You think about someone who has a broken leg, right? We don't allow that person to just walk around and say, oh, well, that's just them. They've always had that broken leg and they'll probably always have that broken leg. No, we take them to someone to seek assistance. And so the same is true when we've noticed patterns of behavior in our family members and our loved ones, and our friends, not to just say, oh, well, she's always like that. We've always known her to be that way. Well, if you've noticed something that it causes concern for you, then that's an opportunity to step in and exhibit kindness towards that person. And yes, you're correct. A lot of us don't want to address others' issues because we're thinking about the ones that we have in our own backpack, right? What trauma experiences do we have that are unresolved and haven't been dealt with? And the truth is there's an ACE survey. And if all of us were to take that survey, in some capacity, we have been impacted by trauma. That's anywhere from a divorce, right? That's a subjective experience for some. They're able to adapt and move on. But the divorce of parents for another individual may be a traumatic experience. And so what I would encourage family members to do when they're noticing things in someone else, also be self-reflective as well, because there might be an opportunity for you to say, hey, let's go together. This is something that we might be able to, engage in with one another, for one another, and not be ashamed, because the truth is, we tell ourselves this is probably just me and no one else. And that's an irrational statement. It's an untrue statement. All of us have been impacted by trauma in some way, by us just looking at CNN and seeing the horrific images on the television. That's a form of secondary trauma. And every time we watch, we bear witness to that. And so it's really reducing the shame, saying, hey, all of us have had some traumatic experience. We just don't want to stay there.
Okay, good. Would you like to add to that, Heather?
Yeah, great job, Carla and Apostle. The only thing I would add to that is we refer to the Lord Jesus Christ as the great physician. And we believe that he has the power to heal us and impart healing to us physically. But when that healing doesn't occur, when we're not instantaneously or miraculously healed, we seek out a physician, a medical doctor, to care for our physical health needs. But our Lord Jesus Christ is also referred to as the wonderful counselor. And we believe that he has the power to instantaneously heal us and to deliver us from mental illness. But when that doesn't happen, we seek out professional help. We go to a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And we want to normalize caring for our mental health needs in the exact same way that we care for our physical health needs. There are a lot of boo-boos that aunties and moms and dads can put Band-Aids on and fix with kisses. But sometimes we have to go to the doctor. And it's the exact same thing for mental health. A lot of times, time with people that we love and hugs and kisses and cares can definitely dissuade and alleviate some of that mental health pain. But when that's not enough, or when that's not having the impact we hoped for, then we have to reach out to that higher level of care. It's just another way that we care for those we love.
Right, right.
I have a question here. I want to know, is mental health inherited? Anybody can answer that.
Yes, I'll answer that. Yes and no. When you're looking at mental health, you do find where essentially, genetic studies show that you're more likely to have a mental health issue if you had a parent or a sibling who has a mental health issue. So yes, it is partially inherited, realizing that just because a parent does have it doesn't mean that you will. but it does show to run in families. But also you see, other things run in families like poverty and trauma and things of that sort can be generational. As the Bible says, curses can be even 3 or 4 generations. So essentially, you're having to deal with the stressors that have been passed down through multiple generations in your family. And I love a quote I have by a friend of mine who said that it ran in my family until it ran into me. So the point is, you've got to work on. That was by Dr. Angela Anderson, actually, a friend of my wife, my friend's wife. But the fact is that it ran in my family until it ran into me. So often you're looking at things that have been passed down through the family, a lot of trauma, incest and things of that sort. And one thing I wanted to add to the statement that Heather made was, when it comes to Jesus Christ, and he talks about himself being a physician, realizing that physicians, as a physician, you work in the physical and the spiritual. So the fact is that there are physical things that you can do that creates miracles just as well as a spiritual. So I tell folk, you don't ask Jesus to do something for you when he's giving you tools that you can do for yourself. If you don't believe in the tools, then the question is, how do you believe in him? Yeah. So we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. We look at what's going on in our families. Realizing that some of those things we can actually change even within ourselves, even if the genetics say one thing. There are a lot of things that you can do on your own to help treat that, but realize also that sometimes it does require medication, and you do see mental illness run in families.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Dr. Patton, as a neurologist, have you had a situation where perhaps you were seeing a patient and realize that was a possibility of some mental things going on, some mental illness? And if so, how do you address that especially when they don't think so, they're thinking it's something else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost every day. Because, and that's why my board, the board is in neurology and psychiatry, because there's so much overlap. When you look at mental illness and the hormones that are released in the brain and so forth, along with that comes, polysubstance abuse with medications and so forth, and it manifests as different things. So one of the biggest things we see is a condition where usually when someone has seizures in their family, they actually produce seizures that aren't real seizures. We call them pseudo seizures or psychogenic seizures. And the reason being is that mentally they're trying to express a feeling of wanting people to notice them, or there's depression or a feeling of not being wanted. So it's expressed outwardly as a neurological condition. And we see that with seizures, we see that with what's called neuropathic pain or other conditions as well. So it's very important, and almost every day I have to stop and just ask people, well, what's really going on in your life? Tell me how you're really feeling. It's beneficial to have family members there as well, so that I can ask about different situations that are going on. But there is a huge overlap between the way a person is doing mentally and their neurological condition.
Okay. Dr. Chism, how can we destigmatize mental illness, especially in minority communities?
Destigmatizing, that's such a good question, because so many people will come in and they will come to me and present a whole list of things that I can clearly say are related to anxiety. And they're determined that there's some medical reason, there's some test that I need to do to determine that, because they refuse to accept or to acknowledge that perhaps that this is related to anxiety or depression. So the first thing, people really have to just realize that there shouldn't be any stigma. And just as there's no stigma if you have a heart attack, or if you break your leg, or if you have. It's really so really difficult to get that message to break through and to resonate in the community. I often refer to my mental health colleagues, but sometimes just to get people to really realize and to acknowledge, or people have a tendency to even they'll play down, any kind of anxiety, or think, oh, well, I'm tough enough, I can handle it. All of these things that are not really so. So there's a really strong false narrative that's out there. We're coming upon all of us who are in healthcare to be able to, let people know that it's okay to get help. Just as we talk to people, I would say, my barbershop and information and encourage when you need help that it's okay to get help, and not just realize and say, to go straight to the negative and say, oh, I'm crazy, or it must, something that's in my head, and all of those things that we hear. And just recognize that it is so very important, because there have been so many people who have been productive that are no longer here because, in the ultimate case of or even homicide. And so we just have to really make sure that we communicate, tell people it's okay, and just, let them know it's the same thing as that broken leg that, that someone else has already mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard that suicide is on the rise. Talk to us about that. Anybody?
I guess I'll lend a hand there. Yes, suicides around the U.S. are definitely on the rise. Oddly enough, in many other countries, it's decreasing. We're one of the few industrialized nations where you see it increasing. But on top of that, and actually, I was writing a book that had to deal with this. We pushed it back because of COVID. Was the increased amount of suicides that you're seeing in Black children? You're seeing exponential rise in that. It used to be when you heard someone committed suicide, you would assume they're not Black, but the rates of suicides in the Black community in the U.S. are higher than Black communities in other places, and it's also higher than other communities within the U.S. as well. So this suicide issue has become a big issue, and really, when you're looking at suicide, normally the biggest key to suicide and recognizing it, and the number one thing that typically is happening is that a person feels hopeless. Hopelessness is key when you're looking at suicide, and that essentially with enough stresses on your mind and on your body and on your life, you can feel as if there's no way out. And part of the depression is that sense of hopelessness that sets in and increases the risk of suicide. Now, of course, if you look at, say, television as a burning high rise, and you see people jumping out the window, they're not jumping out because they're depressed. They're jumping out because they are hopeless at that situation. Mm-hmm. So, looking keenly in the hopeless situation that many Black people and many Black children are finding themselves in, and actually some of the keys to identifying or some of the trends we've noticed. And when I say this, it's difficult to know because it's a recent increase. The research isn't there. And honestly, the research isn't running into it. Sad to say, and that's part of the racial issues that we deal with. But smart kids who are having issues with learning disabilities, ADHD, are those who are more likely to kill themselves in that age group, which is when you're that age we're seeing this between the ages of 5 to 9. When you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the biggest thing in your life really is school. Yeah. And so struggling in school is a big issue for that age group. Now, for your teenagers, it's struggling with peers because your identity is set around who you associate with. And then so often for adults, you're looking at, you're going to transition into the issue of, loss of finances, loss of job, loss of status. And this COVID-19 has caused a lot of issues with that right now with, and one of the issues also within the Black community is your status and the need to show that you make money. And I see this a lot in the Black middle class. So essentially, you're in a financial situation where you're on a teeter-totter edge of going from riding around in, I don't know, a BMW or whatever it might, BMW, Mercedes, whatever, to being flat out broke and homeless. So this situation we're seeing a lot across the United States, and this stressor is not making it any better.
Yeah.
And if I can just piggyback. Oh, I'm sorry. No, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So, Apostle, I was also going to say, oftentimes when we make decisions, even life decisions, something called confirmation bias, where we are looking to confirm what we're already thinking and feeling about a decision that we want. And what we really should be doing, especially when you think about suicide, is looking for disconfirming information. So if we're being told emotionally, no one loves me, no one's supporting me, well, we look for disconfirming information. Where are there spaces where someone does care? Where can I reach out for support? You know, Apostle, we're so grateful that you're very transparent about your own experiences and even talking to us about, that time in your life where you had confirmation, no one loves me, no one cares about me, but we should be looking for disconfirming information, especially as it relates to suicide. And then the other piece is that many of our adults have not practiced and been given opportunities to give voice to the pain and traumatic experiences in our lives. And so we then in turn don't know how to teach that to our children, to be able to have spaces to talk about those things that are concerning them and have quality conversations. And so, it really goes back to we as adults healing our own trauma experiences and giving voice to our pain to navigate through them so that we can then turn and teach the next generation how to do the same.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Dr. Patton, you were gonna say something, then I have a question.
Sure. Yes. No, I was just going to agree with both Carletta and Napoleon. Usually when you talk about suicide, it's not the initial sign of depression. When you don't diagnose someone tomorrow, today, and they commit suicide tomorrow. The one word that I would put in is just cumulative. It's usually a cumulative effect. They have underlying depression, then you've lost your job because of COVID. You can't see your friends and family because of social isolationism, and then some of the other social things that have happened in our nation. So it's important. It's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, and that we all need to recognize because it's not uncommon where I've heard from people who have committed suicide and loved ones or family members would say, well, I didn't think they were going to do it, or they tried before, they said they would do it before, but I didn't think they were going to do it. Well, we need to have this conversation so that we can recognize these signs early and actually intervene, meaning say something, do something, step up. Don't ignore it. Don't just think, oh, they're crazy, they'll get over it, because it's usually a cumulative thing. So you want to try to step in early.
Yeah, and you're right, Dr. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Chism.
And one thing that I would just add is that so many in our community tend to just minimize all of that livelihood of trauma. I've had so many people who have come in who have been victims of all types of abuse, of sexual abuse, and they will minimize and look to other examples, especially things that have been generational, have gone on within the family, and they minimize all of that trauma and will even say, well, so-and-so, was able to overcome it, or my situation is not as bad as somebody else's. And so as it accumulates, it's just one other thing, and feel like they need to be strong enough to be able to rectify all of this on their own. So yeah, we're saying similar things, that it's the accumulation, and just to be able to recognize it so that they can seek help.
Yeah, that's real good. I want to go to Heather. You were talking about our relationship with Jesus Christ, and so what do you say? And we try to respect the belief of others and respect their faith, but what do you say to perhaps a parent who may have a child, perhaps who's suffering with mental illness or something, and the parent really not wanting to seek the help that they need? They're just going to believe God, and the situation could be worsening for the child. And so how do you address that?
Yeah, great question, Apostle. Definitely holding the space for parents. Many times when our children are struggling, we tend to reflect on ourselves and judge ourselves harshly. I should have done more. I should have behaved differently. I shouldn't have exposed them to or experienced. But the reality is we do hold the space for those parents. We want to listen to and create space for their dialogue. What is their fear? What is their concern? And we partner with them in their faith. As a huge person of faith, faith is my foundation. I believe in God's ability to heal, but he doesn't always heal. And so when we look at the signs and the symptoms, working with the families and the parents in their belief system with respect to that, we ask where we might be able to enter in and offer support. It's not, we're not correcting or fixing a wrong. We want to come alongside families and offer support. What are the things that are not working for your family? What are the struggles that you're seeing arising? What do you wish would change as a parent? You know your child better than anyone. What are you seeing? You're the expert. Help us partner with you so we can help provide the support that your child needs.
Yeah, that is so good. You know, I'm often reminded of the story in the Bible when Jairus' daughter, she was at the point of death, and Jesus came to Jairus' house and he healed her. And when he healed her supernaturally, then he told the parents to give her something to eat. So Jesus took care of the spiritual thing, but then he gave the parents the responsibility of getting her the natural help and the natural things that she needed. And I think sometimes we've seen so many people, they think to do something natural, seek out a psychiatrist or to seek counsel or to go to a doctor, that it's coming against their faith, when really it's not. Faith without works is dead. There's some things we have to do in the natural. We all believe God to supply our needs, but we go to work every day. And so we know there's some things we have to do in the natural. I want to ask you a question, Dr. Higgins. I want to ask you a question, Dr. Higgins, because within the Black community, at least I know the community I grew up in, we knew several individuals who had mental illness, but we really didn't seek professional help for them. Either we just kept them in the house or in the neighborhood. Everybody kind of knew them, or just didn't have the resources. I believe it's just a lack of knowledge at that time. And so, but if you could just kind of encourage, whoever's out there, a family member, whatever, if you have a loved one, a friend, and you see, and then also, Dr. Higgins, we had this idea, I'm not going to see a psychiatrist. There's nothing wrong with me. And so it was always a negative side to going to see a psychiatrist. And so if you could just let us know the benefit in that and why they need to seek that kind of help.
Well, thank you for that question, Pastor. It's an issue that's longstanding in the Black community of not talking about your mental health. And I wonder where that actually comes from and why so much do we have that particular issue. And the fact is that mental illness is just like any other illness. So often we don't realize how many psychiatrists are out there. So when you're looking at the number of physicians, there's your general practice docs, your primary care docs, being your pediatrician, your family medicine doctor, and your internal medicine doctor. The fourth most common doctor there is the psychiatrist. So a lot of people are accessing us, but so often the Black community doesn't. That's because of stigma and also a lack of knowledge. I would say too often in the community or in the mental health community, we don't target Black people. Are we out and are we speaking about it, or are our churches talking about it, or our politicians talking about it, understanding that we have a mass trauma that has occurred to us over 400 years. And I think some of us not talking about our emotions and our feelings comes directly from that trauma, where if you weren't in control of your own body, I couldn't even control what was going on in my own house with my wife and with my kids. Or even with my own self. So with that mass trauma going on, it caused us to internalize a lot of things and not talk about it. And I want, essentially, if I had to go off and do something and then I finally walk back into my home, chances are we really didn't talk about what actually occurred. So that issue of not talking about our trauma, not talking about our pain, realizing as Black people, we're not able to talk about the racial issues that occur in our job place, in our work, and people making sensitive comments and make jokes about things that are not funny. And we eat that stuff all day. So that internalizing trauma issue is a generational issue that I think turns into depression and then into learned helplessness. So I think a lot of times when we say things like, I'm gonna turn that over to the Lord, I'm not gonna speak on that, things of that sort, some of that to me sounds like learned helplessness, and that I am to the point where I feel like I cannot do anything any further. So therefore I'll just keep taking it, and I'll keep my mouth shut, grit my teeth, tighten my lip, and I'll just show up to work tomorrow. I have to continue to do it again. Now, one resource, and I'll go ahead and self-plug myself, but it meets what we're talking about here is my book here, which is Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. So it's Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities, written by 10 Black psychiatrists. I'm the CEO of the group, Global Health Psychiatry. And the important part of that book, realize that it's a general mental health book that anyone can read, and it makes sense. But the fact is that we put in there for Black communities and put Black faces on the front, trying to get Black people to read it. Mm-hmm. All right. So that they will know it is specific for them. So my people that I've read it over who are other races don't even notice that it's targeted towards Black people, but we do put more of that generational trauma in there and some examples that hit within racism. And we have a chapter on racism, but also we have a chapter on the medications. And then we have a chapter on non-medical treatment, those things that you can do in your life to treat your mental health, such as therapy and counseling, diet, hygiene, sleeping, exercise, deep breathing, prayer, meditation, all of that goes into your mental health. So it's never one particular thing that's going to help treat your depression. Like there's never one thing that's going to cure your heart disease. There's never one thing that's going to improve your physical therapy. It's a combination of things that need to be done. And we need to be in the mindset of my mental health is not just seeing the doctor and taking a pill. I can guarantee you, I can't think of a single patient I have that essentially you took the pill and all of a sudden your mental health issues were gone.
Right.
It's always going to be a series of things that has to happen to function at your optimal. And we need to communicate that to the Black community that, listen, your brain is a functional organ just like every other part of your body, and it suffers illness like any other. So, so the problem is I tease neurologists, they call themselves neurology when they can actually see it and touch it. And then all of a sudden it's no longer psychiatry, it becomes neurology. So much of what I do, I can't see and I can't touch. I can't put handlebars on that thing and I can't see it on a scan. All right. So essentially that leads to the issue of not trusting. And, and I'll say another, to take that a step further, in the Black community, we don't trust the medical community. There's so many ills that have happened in the past. The father of psychiatry had a lot of racist things he said. The father of OBGYN and all the pictures were actually doing studies on slaves who did not have a medical issue or problem without anesthesia, just started ripping on women. So, the Tuskegee syphilis incident, the disparities in COVID treatment. I hear Black people say, I went to the hospital and I had a cough and I felt bad. I felt sick and I got turned away. They told me to call this phone number and send me back home. So these disparities continue to occur and they're real. So the thing is that, as stated in psychiatry, just because I'm paranoid does not mean you're not trying to kill me. The fact is that when it comes to our overall health, and when it comes to mental health, especially because we can't actually see it and touch it, it's very hard for Black people to believe in that case because of the past trauma and history. And I won't even call it history. I'll call it current medical care. Any study that you look at in any discipline, Black people have worse outcomes. Yeah. If I'm a Black female in this bed and there's a white female in that bed, there's typically a 50% more likelihood that it will be a bad turnout. Wow. That I will not make it out of that hospital more so than another race, even if we showed up with the same issues. So that's a lot of the issue that we're dealing with, and we need to target mental health in the Black community. You know, I applaud you all for even having this discussion, because mental illness is not taken care of. And in the Black community, and the fact is that it's the least likely of all healthcare situations for people to focus on, because we can't see it. The science, sadly, the science of mental health is behind. It's behind cardiology, it's behind neurology, it's behind OBGYN, and we're desperately trying to catch up. But the fact is this: 85 to 90% of whatever's going on with your mind is treatable. And when I say treatable, I'm not talking about just with medications, even though those can help. But between all the lifestyle changes, the dietary changes, the sleep changes, dealing with the past trauma, dealing with the past issues, 85, 90% of whatever's going on with you does not have to impair your life. Wow. We've got enough treatments to do that, to treat that. You don't have to live that way. And the saddest thing I've seen is how people will live that way for 40, 50 years. And finally, as they come towards the end of their life and they go in to see a psychiatrist, they say to themselves, all of the missed opportunities that I had simply because I never dealt with my mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. So good.
Can I connect something that Dr. Higgins just started and ended with something that you taught us, and it was in a visual showing us being pushed down, and then someone comes back by us a week later, and we are still on the ground, right? We can attribute why we were pushed down, to the initial contact with someone. But the determination of why we stay where we are and don't access the help and the resources and the supports, then that becomes something that we have to, resolve within ourselves. And that, yes, traumatic things have happened to us generationally, even currently. But as Dr. Higgins is saying, if there are supports available, then reach out and access those.
Right.
Yeah,
that's good. I have a question. During this time, there's been a lot of loss. And people have lost the relatives, family, spouse. There's been a lot of loss, and that's traumatic for many of them. In several cases, it was several family members. And so I know Heather, she's her expertise is in trauma. So tell us a little bit of information about that when people experience loss traumatically.
Yeah, so grief and trauma often overlap. The interesting thing is that trauma always includes grief. Grief doesn't always necessarily include trauma. As a matter of fact, sometimes grief stands alone. But I would say, and I want to think about how this applies to systemic racism and how it applies to transgenerational trauma, because there are really 8 ideologies behind trauma exposure, and that is terror. So a heightened level of fear that leads to terror, anger, worry, hurt, guilt, shame, revenge mindset, and feeling powerless. And we don't experience those with grief, but we do experience those with trauma. And remember, grief isn't always about death. Grief is about loss. Yes. We're seeing people in our community right now grieving the loss of jobs, the loss of incomes, the loss of a way of life, the loss of some of those milestones that we wanted to celebrate and some of those family traditions. We're grieving those, and those were a traumatic loss. So we will see and continue to see an emergence of those 8 things as a normalized response to trauma. But I love what Dr. Higgins and Carlette were saying. We don't have to become victims of what happened to us. We can access help. And I'm super excited that we're all together as a mental health community to say we're here. Help is available. And it's really important that there are people who look like us who can help us. One of the reasons I think that healthcare, mental health care is not accessed as much by some of our minority communities is because it's hard to go to a therapist that doesn't look like you, understand what you've experienced, or come from where you came from. And that's why our effort to teach and train our children to enter the area of mental health, to pursue mental health careers is really important in the coming days, because we need more helpers. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. He just had to step away. But I have another question is, there's a young lady who's under 40, I have to say that, and lost a spouse. What can she expect when going in to see a grief counselor?
Yeah, I would say lots and lots of loving care and support, walking her through those 5 stages of trauma, normalizing her experience. One of the things about a traumatic loss like that is it can be so isolating. She can really feel like she's alone, like no one else understands what she's going through. Even though other people may have lost their husband, it wasn't her husband, and they didn't have the same relationship. So a huge part of what we can experience in grief counseling is just connection to someone who creates the space for us to process through the stages of grief.
Mm-hmm. And how long is those sessions?
So it varies. What I
Okay.
was going to say is that, you know, I would hope that she find comfort in knowing that she's not going to be rushed past this experience, right? There's no 6 sessions to say after this, all shall be well. Mm-hmm. It depends on each individual, each unique situation. You know, there are different actual types of grief. And then, you know, like I said, our experiences that we bring to our present situation, even our present grief experiences, they have a profound impact. And so I would want to encourage her in saying you won't be rushed past the process. We understand that there are ebbs and flows when it comes to grief. There may be times that, you know, we get to a place where we call it maintenance, and maybe you're seeing, you know, your counselor or therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist less frequently, but still regularly to be able to process. You know, grief doesn't have a time limit, and to the degree and the amount of time that you need support will continue.
Okay.
I
have what about those that are lonely? Because, you know, you could be married and still be lonely during this time. People are really experiencing that time just being by themselves, being in the house, not going anywhere, no activities going on. What do we tell them? What can they do so they're not feeling lonely? Anybody can answer. Dr. Chism?
Well, loneliness is so, like you said, there are married people who feel isolated and alone. And one of the things that I always try to tell people is think of other, because when you focus on yourself, and it's easy to get to that trap. We have to do, we've all, I'm sure, have had to do our own self-talk with this pandemic, from time to time. But if you think other, how would, who can I help? Who, think of, I tell people, like, volunteer at the hospital. I mean, that's not appropriate now with the pandemic, but think of those things that you can do and think about somebody else. Check on your neighbors. Who can you help? What kind of assistance can you provide? And try to focus on other things. Like, there have been blood drives since the pandemic. Participate in and think about somebody else, which can help. Now, it doesn't take away, that feeling of, I'm out here by myself, all alone and isolated. But it is, those are some of the things that can help. And then, like we've already said, just sometimes even exercise, those things that just kind of help your mind and to clear your mind so that, you're just not feeling all alone. Zoom has had a great, run. People have been doing all kind of Zoom conferences, Facebook Live, all those kind of, use social media, to reach out to people. And then the other thing is just let people know. Sometimes, you can just let people know, hey, you know what? I'm really feeling by myself. Can you reach out to me? And that's something we tend not to do because we think, okay, maybe we can handle this on our own. It's okay to call your friends and say, hey, you know what? I'm having a moment.
Mm-hmm. So wise.
Dr. Patton, that's good, Dr. Chism. Dr. Patton, what about people perhaps who want to seek some kind of professional help, in particular for mental illness, but maybe because of their career and perhaps they feel they're going to be discriminated against and could possibly, maybe they think they would lose their job if they came forth and their employer found out that they were seeking help for mental illness. What would you say to that individual?
Yes. So I would be very clear, and I want to make sure I'm very clear on this. Mental illness is an illness, just like diabetes or a heart condition or anything else. So an employer cannot discriminate against you. Just the same thing as if you were physically handicapped or had any other health condition. we have to stop treating mental illness as if it is something different from the other things, such as physical impairments or other health conditions. So I would up front, and if you look at the studies, and well, one big thing, for instance, is burnout among physicians, because there are a lot of physicians right now throughout everything that's been going on are suffering as well. Suicide amongst doctors is peaking. Depression amongst doctors as well. And we've actually done studies and showed that you actually want your employees to feel good both physically and mentally, because they're more productive. There are less days that they miss from work. So I think employers should actually encourage their employees to seek counseling, to seek help for their mental state of mind, because in the end it makes them a better employee. But they absolutely cannot be discriminated against for a mental illness, because it is a illness as like other things.
Okay, good. Listen, as we get ready to wind down, first I want to say thank you. I think all of you guys were just tremendous. Not sure if we had any questions to come in, but I want to give
any questions. You can go ahead and send them.
Yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and send your questions in. And while we have an excellent panel here, we'll give those questions to them and have them to answer them. But while we are anticipating that, I want to give each of you an opportunity just to share a word, some kind of advice based on what we talked about here tonight, and the importance of seeking the help that you may need. I'll start with you, Carlette.
Sure. Thank you. So, when you think about our primary care doctor, just as Dr. Patton talked about, right? We see our doctor because we're sick, we're looking for some diagnostic evaluation or maintenance. And so counseling and therapy, psychotherapy is the same. Some of us have an illness that is treatable, that we're coming to a therapist, counselor, psychiatrist for. Some of us are coming for diagnostic reasons, right? We've been having these feelings and we want an assessment to know where we stand. And then some of us come for maintenance. I've heard someone say before that regular contact with their therapist is the best gift that they've given to themselves. Because in therapy, you receive uninterrupted space to feel seen and heard. We compete for those spaces in our jobs, even in our home. And so counseling and therapy provides that space. And then also to make sure that we're practicing self-care, especially while we're in the stay-at-home environment, and knowing the difference between self-care and a distraction. So self-care is long-term, ongoing. Distractions are temporary. So things like shopping.
Mm-hmm. Like shopping.
Dr. Chism.
Again, this has been really, I'm so glad that we were having an opportunity to do this, and thank you again for allowing me to participate. But one thing I would just say, just really ask for help when you need it. Don't be afraid don't be afraid. Even if you're going to your primary care doctor, I had a patient years ago, and I asked her who was her therapist, and she said you, and I said no, I'm not a therapist in training, but I did have a listening ear. So there's always somebody that you can start out with. Go to your primary care physician. Usually they can direct you to where you need to go. Don't be afraid, be bold, be passionate. There are so many people who just want to give up, and if I could just encourage anybody, just when things seem to not feel quite right, it probably isn't. And that's the time to seek help. And if the right person is not doing what you need to do, then it's incumbent upon you to keep looking, ask somebody to help navigate with you and stand with you.
Okay, that's really good. Dr. Patton?
Yes, thank you again, Apostle Perry and Lady Perry, for this wonderful session. What I would probably want to leave people with are two words, and that's fight or flight. It ties into why your mental health is affected or is tied in with your general health. This response is a natural response within our brain. It's called the fight or flight response. It sends hormones out that does things like release blood sugar, raising your blood sugar in your body, so because that's the main fuel for your muscles. It increases your heart rate. It causes your pupils to enlarge so that you can see better. It was best used back in hunting gathering days when you were worried about a saber-toothed tiger or a bear jumping out and you had to protect your family. But what has happened is nowadays we are living in constant fight or flight responses throughout our body. We wake up every day, we get in traffic and someone cuts us off and we get upset. Then we get to the job and someone took our park and we get up in this constant fight or flight response throughout the day. Our bodies were not meant to live in this condition long term, and that's why we're seeing the long-term health effects of living in this high stress environment, because we're doing those things like raising our blood sugar, raising our blood pressure. So it's important for your general health to get your mental health in order. And that could be as simple as taking time throughout the day to pray, meditate, mindfulness. Just I sit at my desk if I'm going through the day and I reach a point where I feel like I'm a little stressed. I close the door and do a 10-minute breathing exercise, because you can calm this response down within your own body. So it's important that we pay attention to that, as that can help our general health as well.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Ms. Heather, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak at this time.
Yes, thank you guys so much for including me in the panel. And thank you, Apostle and Lady Perry, for hosting such an important conversation as faith leaders. I would say there are two things that I would mention. First of all, in all of our offices, we have PowerPoints, and one of the slides on our TV says the healthiest people on the planet spend time on our sofas. And I noticed someone put in the comments beginning to think about, so is mental health somewhat like physical health, and that we should go and get a checkup periodically? Well, absolutely. If that's something you're feeling maybe needful or helpful, I would absolutely recommend that you consider that we normalize reaching out for mental health and mental wellness checkups or exams, as Carlette mentioned. And then remember that some of our employers actually have EAP programs, and those employee assistance programs sometimes include free sessions of counseling. So not only do we not have to necessarily be concerned about will our employer know or not, oftentimes our employer will pay for those services, because they realize, as Dr. Higgins was talking about, that the healthier we are, the better we perform at work. It's our overall wellness. And then the last thing I would just mention is my favorite word in the English language. It's why I named my practices Clear Hope, is that hope is the belief that something good may happen and the intent to make it so. And the reality is that hope without intent is just a wish. And the Bible says that these three things remain. They endure forever, and they are faith, hope, and love. It doesn't say faith wishing in love, but faith, hope, and love. So we have to have an intent to create the goodness in our lives. And that's why this conversation tonight is so crucial. Thank you for including me.
Good. Thank you so much. Dr. Higgins, he touched on that a little bit too, talking about that hopelessness. And so Dr. Higgins, you may go ahead and share your comments, please.
Apostle Perry and Sister Pastor, hey, listen, I want to thank you all for just having me to be a part of this, and understanding how important mental health is for the public, for African American people to start to engage. Realize that we've got to take the mystery out of mental health. It is so common, and it impacts so many people. Realizing that nearly a quarter to half of the population is going to suffer from some sort of mental health issue. Life happens, and it keeps happening, and it keeps rolling. And realize that you have professionals out there who can help you. One thing I will mention about the book, we do have a chapter in there on everything that you wanted to ask a psychiatrist but were afraid to. And what we do is go through what the psychiatric interview is going to be about, what the doctor is going to look for, realizing that there's no reason to believe that what we do is a mystery. what we're doing is trying to help people, and there's help to be received. So thank you all. You know, the other panelists have said it all, and I appreciate being able to be a part of this important topic.
Thank you so much. Dr. Higgins, if you would again, hold up your book, give us the name of it, and just let us know where we can get it at. I'm sure, you know, people are watching and they may want to get a copy of that. Where can they go to get a copy of it?
So this book is available on Amazon. So just type in Mind Matters, a resource guide, and it will spell out the rest. Typically, if you put in Mind Matters, you'll see the picture of this beautiful logo that we have here. And oddly enough, I think my neurologist friend who likes to look at scans may pick up this sagittal cut going through the corpus callosum, superimposed with the ink blot for the mental health.
I saw that. Nice touch. Yeah.
I think you would notice that y'all like to look at stuff over there in neurology.
Does anyone else have a book? So I know Heather has a site that she just launched.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can visit clearhopewellness.com and click on the tab that says COVID-19 resources. There are a lot of free resources there, including a downloadable document called Does My Child Need to See a Counselor? If you're not sure, access that free form and just use that as a guide to inform your decision making.
Okay. And Carlette, how can our viewers get in contact with you?
Sure. So my website is www.csmcounseling.solutions.com. And I have resources available for you as well. And in addition to that, you're able to be in control of sessions when you'd like to schedule. In addition to that, something that I want to stress too in helping individuals get over like the angst of what is this first session going to be like. Actually detail what your first session will be like, whether you're an adult or whether you're bringing your child in, because information reduces anxiety. And when we know what's going to happen to us, and believe me, I was that kid. I wanted to know about every shot before they were administered. It just helps us overcome the anxious feelings that might be associated with the first meeting in therapy.
Okay. Dr. Chism, is there a way we can contact you?
Yes, I am at Kelsey Seabold in Meyerland. So if you go to the Kelsey Seabold website, and we are actually taking in office visits again. We were, kind of closed for a while. And office visits, and so kelsey-seabold.com is the website. And then I am at the Meyerland location at the old Borders bookstore on 610 in Beach Nut.
Okay. And what about you, Dr. Patton?
Yes, I'm at the UT Neurosciences in Memorial City, that tall tower right there at the 10 in the Beltway. If you just put in my name or UT Neurosciences Memorial City, you'll have all the information.
Okay, good. Thank you guys so much. And we got your book, Dr. Higgins, but what about if someone wanted to just contact you?
You can find me at NapoleonHigginsMD.com. NapoleonLeon, NapoleonHigginsMD.com.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. We want to do that because, there are a lot of people on who are watching, and although they're getting some great information, I'm looking at some of the comments, and we're getting great responses. And so, and I know that when we get off the line here, people still have questions, and also people are probably ready to reach out and get some solutions.
And we'll make sure it goes up. If Lynn or Jan could go ahead and start putting their information up so people can have it.
Yeah, we'll put it up so they can have it also. And so again, Charlotte and I, we just want to say thank you.
Yes,
thank you so very much. Thanks to each of you. I know you guys are very busy, but for you to carve out this time to come on with us and talk about mental health and mental illness, I know it was very impactful for a whole lot of people. So thank you guys so very much. We wish you God's best and God's speed in your practice, in your field. And so we thank you for taking the time to just share with our audience, with our viewing audience tonight. And so, is there anything else?
No,
Charlotte?
I didn't see any more questions.
Okay. Okay.
That was it.
All right. Listen, thank you guys, and you guys be safe out there with everything going on, and take care of yourselves, and take care of yourselves as you are taking care of others. You are needed. You are necessary. What you do is important. You are valuable, and you are making a difference. I'd like to just sign off with just a brief word of prayer, if we will. Father, we just thank you for our panel this evening. We thank you for their wisdom, their knowledge, and their expertise. I thank you, Father, they shared things tonight that's going to be impactful, that is impactful to those who are listening, even those who will listen and watch later on. I thank you, Father, that the impact shall be the same. Now, bless them for their time here tonight. Thank you, Father, you keep them well, keep their families well as they are tending to the health of others. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. Yeah, you guys were great. You guys were
All
awesome.
right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.